Okay, guys, welcome. We have another episode of Coffee with Coach Patrick. Today, I'm joined by Canadian national team member Danielle Hanus. Good morning, Danielle. How are you today?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. The sun is shining today, so it's a good day. So I'm glad that you joined me. Thank you very much for joining me today. I just honestly, I'm so fascinated by your career, and I've kind of seen you around the pool deck. And I know we were actually on a team together, even though I didn't see much of you in 2014 with Junior Pan Packs. But I'm really pleased to get a chance to talk to you because I'm curious about your story, and I just like to kind of hear swimmers tell their stories and their journeys of how they got to where they are. You've had a really decorated career, both as a junior swimmer and then now as a senior athlete. So it's going to be fun to walk you through that. But first thing I want to ask you is A, how are you doing? How's all your family doing? How are things going? Because your family, I'm assuming, is back home in Ontario and you're in Victoria. So just how are you and how's everyone in your world right now?
I'm personally doing really, really well, like as best as possible as I can during this whole situation. We're living in a crazy time, and trying to find like good outcomes and good positive outcomes is hard, especially when you don't know what's next or what's coming or how long everything's going to take. So just trying to be positive has really helped. My family's doing really well. My parents are safe and healthy, so that's all that really matters to me. Both my like extended family, like my cousins and aunts and uncles and all that stuff, they're healthy too. So I'm just happy that everyone's safe and doing well too.
Excellent. That's good to hear. Are you an only child? Do you have siblings at all?
I am an only child.
Nice. Good. My daughter's going to be an only child as well. We're going to be oneers and doners. That's it for us, right? So if you don't mind me asking, like, how are you doing? Like you were really in the mix of training. Things were kind of heating along, getting ready for trials. Everything fully stopped. So how are you managing right now with your time? Do you have access to any water or endless pools? Have you braved open water? Like what are you doing to keep yourself healthy and fit and just stay busy now that we've somewhat been shut down completely?
Well, so far it's been kind of a challenge just knowing when we're getting back in the pool. So we've definitely had contact with one of the coaches at Island. She actually has an endless pool. So
Oh,
we can
nice.
just kind of like email her and talk to her if we wanted to get into the water and get the fuel back for the water, considering we're on, what is it, almost week 7 now, if not
Yeah,
week
7. Yeah.
8, depending on where you are. So it's been kind of weird, but knowing that I have the ability to access just like an endless pool is really great. But so far, mostly I've just been running, doing dry land. I've been doing some hikes up like Mount Doug, Mount Work, all of like the close mountains all around, and just kind of enjoying time, getting my head out of the pool a little bit. This is the longest break I've been out of the water in, oh gosh, probably about a decade,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit less.
Yeah, I've been telling people this is the longest I've been away from a swimming pool in my adult life.
Yeah,
And I don't know
it's
what to do with
weird.
myself, right? There's so many days where you feel tired and bad and you're going to the pool and it feels like a drag sometimes, right? And then right now it's like what I would give right now to go to a pool at 4:30 in the morning. I would love it.
Oh yeah, we were all joking about that. We're all sitting there and we have this group chat just between some of like our swimmers in our group, and we're sitting there, we're like, wow, well, I'm never gonna complain about a practice ever again after this. Like I miss the pool.
Well, and that kind of makes me think, right? Like I know for me personally, this has given me this I don't know if I call it an appreciation that had waned a little bit. Like you almost take for granted what you get to do every day, and you go through the motions. But now that you don't have it, do you have a different respect or appreciation for swimming that maybe wasn't there before? Just the ability to go to the pool. Like I don't know if I'm wording this correctly, but you know what I mean? Like just a different feeling towards the sport or towards the pool now that you haven't been able to use it or do it.
No, I totally do. I totally understand what you're saying, but it's true. I have this different perspective and different respect for this sport now because we invest so much of our time and energy, and even just the smaller things we don't really realize how committed we are. It's so weird just not being in the pool because knowing you want to do something you love and you appreciate and you enjoy doing, and not being able to do that is just, it's hard. So just like knowing that we have time out of the pool, and then we know this will get back to the normal at some point, just knowing like when we get back to it is hard, but at the same time it definitely has increased my appreciation and my love for the sport ever like that much more.
Absolutely. And that's the biggest, I think that's the hardest thing for people right now. It's not like when you're away from it and you know the time period, you can deal with that. But the moment it's like, I don't know when I'm getting back into a pool. I don't know when I'm going to start training again. I don't know when I'm going to have access to my teammates. Like it's the uncertainty, the unknown that really becomes the harder part because it's an unspecified amount of time, right?
Yeah, that's the new mental challenge that comes with everything. Like you said, it's easier to get back into the sport and take some time away from it, especially like for us, we get anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks off in the summer after our last meet, just depending on where you live. If you go home for a couple weeks and then you come back to the pool. So we kind of know when we're coming back and when we're leaving just for like our summer break. But at the same time, now that we're on week 7, we don't exactly know when we're getting back in the pool, even though we're slowly starting to reopen things. But we still don't know the whole plan, the phases. We don't know when we're getting back. So that's the hard part. We could be another 2 weeks, we could be another 3, 4, just kind of, it's all up in the air. So that's what the biggest mental hurdle is.
Yeah, it's one of the big challenges, and then like dealing with it from a head coach and a coaching perspective, and dealing with programmers. I mean, the windows are, we can have you back in the water in September, we can have you in the water in June, we just don't know. And they're figuring out all these new protocols. So it's the trickle down of wait and see. And as an athlete, you're waiting and waiting, and you're trying to be patient. But it makes you think. So being a national team member, you've been swimming at the High Performance Center Victoria, I think, for 4 years now. And one of the models they always say when we're on Team Canada trips, and I know they say that the center is, you always have to be ready when things don't go as planned, and be ready for to adapt to whatever you come up against, right? Well, this would be the biggest adaptation to circumstance you've ever had in your career. I think we would all say that this is the biggest one. So do you feel a lot of that messaging and mental training of being ready for the unexpected has helped deal with this, at least initially?
Oh, yeah, for sure. We've definitely gone through various mottos and various teachings through our sports psychologist, Charlene Hoare.
Mhm.
She's definitely sat down with all of us and done education sessions, or sat down one-on-one and just like has taught us and helped us just mentally prepare for even just like the small things. Like if something doesn't go right during a competition, or it's basically expecting the unexpected, nothing is going to be perfect. We've definitely gone through a lot of training with that mental performance aspect, just helping us through this whole competition, but now moving it into a lifestyle right now. So it's definitely helped a lot for sure. We've actually had a mental agility session. I think it was
Okay.
either last week or the week before, and we sat down for half an hour and talked about the different aspects of mental agility that we could be practicing during this time, that'll help us through this time as well. But it'll also help us for competition and even just practices and other life aspects outside of the pool too.
It's funny. It's funny you say that because, well, you made me think of a couple of things there. One with the mental agility and adjusting things. I don't know if you've seen. There's a Connor McDavid documentary that came out earlier this year, and it was about how he messed up his knee, and he actually I think he tore his ACL, whatever. And they gave him a few options that he had to make at like 21 or 22 years old, that surgery that would alter his entire life, and he rehabbed. Now he's Connor McDavid, so he was able to rehab without surgery. But how he came all the way back. But the point I was going to get at with that is, he said, okay, well, we can't skate, we can't do this, but let's address all of the physical deficiencies we've had in all other areas while we can't be on the ice. And then I've kind of tried to take that approach to my athletes. And I'm wondering if you guys are doing the same thing, where it's like, okay, what are my deficiencies that I can now have time to address because I can't be in the pool training all the time? Have you been able to take advantage of the time to work on different weaknesses or areas?
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the also the other main things we've been doing with our physiotherapist, Matt Rose. He's even said, he's like, now that we're not in the pool, you still have the ability to get injuries. But if you've had existing injuries in the past, definitely now is the best time to be working on them and prehab exercises to make them stronger and make them less of an injury or less of a constant problem if they're in the pool. So just do stuff to help like maintain. If you had a shoulder problem, do like your rotations, your arm hat and your shoulder prehab. We've definitely looked at some of the deficiencies and the challenges we've had as athletes and been able to sit down and work on them now,
Mhm.
even out of the pool. Because if we've had this saying for a while through Brad, Alan, Eugene, Ryan, and everyone I can think of, it's harder to do something in the pool if you can't do it outside the pool. So
Mhm.
that's our whole, if you can learn to do it outside the pool, you can slowly start transitioning it and putting it into the pool, into your stroke, into your streamline, whatever aspect you're trying to work on. So yeah, it's definitely been a positive in the sense being able to work on some of the things I have like I struggle with outside the pool. So
Mhm.
when I get back in the pool, hopefully it's not as big of a challenge or as big of a problem for me.
Well, that's the thing, right? And you can do different things. And I don't know, like some swimmers run like baby giraffes that just doesn't go very well. So I don't know how you are as a runner. Some swimmers are great runners, but being able to do different forms of cardio, not a runner.
Not a runner, but that's okay.
Yeah. That's why I always feel like I'm safer putting swimmers on bikes and usually stationary bikes. For some reason, I have this problem in my club with swimmers who fall off bikes. And they said, "Well, you don't like when I ride a bike." I said, "No, I have no problem with you riding the bike. It's when you fall off the bike. I have a problem with the falling part. The riding part is fine, right?" So staying cardio fit or aerobically fit is one thing, and then being able to work on strength and stuff like that. So that was my second question I was gonna get into is like with the living circumstances, right? You're obviously you're not with your family. They're back home. I don't know if you have roommates or family you're living with, what your access is to strength training equipment at home. Like, have you had to get creative? Like, how are you doing? Are you alone? Do you have roommates? Like, what's your situation as far as being isolated right now?
I'm currently living alone. My roommate went home for the summer,
Okay.
just because she could, and they ended up closing classes early. So she was like, I'm just gonna go home. There's no point in me staying if I can leave early. So I'm currently living here in my apartment by myself, but we have had access to some equipment. We have a stability ball, a TRX, and some bands, a med ball we've gotten from the center that we just kind of brought home and just been doing stuff like that. And our program that Liz and Brian and TDA have all built together has made a huge impact on how we're keeping fit and training. They've given us a schedule to try to keep some form of normalcy,
Hmm.
but it's been so helpful, and it's been probably the weirdest but most fun experience doing something completely different and still trying to do stuff new, getting back into the pool.
Well, and that's you kind of go through now doing things completely differently to try and support your swimming after doing it like the normal training way for so many years, right? So kind of on that then, take me back to the beginning because this is the part that I get super fascinated. Like I think we're all doing the best we can given the circumstances, right? Um, and it's all we can really do. But I'm always fascinated with people how they got in the sport, how they got started. So go back to little girl Danielle. You're young. You're how did you get into swimming? Like how did you start with lessons? How did you get into swim club? Was there somebody that kind of pushed you or motivated you to get into it? Like how did the whole world of swimming start for you?
The weird story about that was I started out with swimming lessons for the Red Cross, going through my NLS and all that stuff. But I ended up getting up to a pretty high level. I think I was level 7, but I was 5 at the time. So I was with 12-year-olds, give or take, is what my mom has told me. But then they kept telling me that I was failing the course, but it wasn't because I couldn't do any of the required stuff for the level. It's just because I was too young to do some of the next stuff. And that's when all like the lifeguarding stuff started to get in. It just was content that I wasn't going to be able to understand at such a young age. So my parents took me out of swimming lessons and actually put me in the Newmarket Stingrays
Okay, yeah.
for at the age of 5, 6, and just have continued on from there. And I started out with Splash, which is like their really young program for people kind of learning how to swim, developing their skills. And I just kind of stuck with it from there and just I've swam for the Newmarket Stingrays for 12 years before moving out here to university where I swam for the High Performance Center, Victoria for 4 years, and also UVic.
So that's like 16 years that you've been in the sport for a 22-year-old. That's a large portion of your life, right?
Yeah, it's a long I can't really remember times before not being in the pool.
So were you always a water baby? Like you hear this a lot about swimmers who got into it really young, and it's like the parents said, "Well, you always wanted to be in the water, and when you were in the water, you were smiling." Was that you? Just they couldn't keep you out of the water. You was always happy in the water, or was it just like, "Well, we want our daughter to learn how to swim, so we're going to put her in lessons," and you had an aptitude for it? Like how did that go for you?
I think it was a little bit of both because I have a cottage up north in Ontario.
Mhm.
So my cottage is actually water access, so we had to take a boat to get to it anyway. So it's like one of those things where I kind of had to learn to swim just as a safety issue, but also I was surrounded by water anyway, so I just kind of loved being in the water and I loved just swimming and jumping around, playing around and all that.
So, and that I always find that too. If a kid has access to kind of open water or a lake or that sort of thing where they get to go and swim and play, they usually have pretty good understanding of how to move through the water. Because that's the same thing. Like I know you were on a couple of teams with James Durgasoff, but he grew up in a small town right on the lake, so
Yeah.
like everything was lake swimming. And I always say those kids that had access to water and just the ability to play, it was so much easier to coach them versus everything that was taught to somebody, and they don't have that natural just comfortability in the water, right?
Yeah. It's definitely really weird to think about just like how people have gone their whole lives without really spending much time in the water, and then someone who comes from small town right by a lake, or even as a cottage up north in Ontario, just like being completely surrounded by water, how much the affinity you have for water
Mhm.
after.
So you came through, you started young, you went through the process like most kids through a swim club. At what point, what age would you say you started to really notice you had some success in racing, or did you fall in love with racing right away, or is that something that took a little bit of time for you to get comfortable with?
I didn't really think too much about it when I was younger. It probably started to hit me around the age of 12, 13 is when I was like, wow, like I really, really enjoy this. And I had a coach at the time. He was like, you're a really good swimmer to begin with, but I played a lot of other sports at the same time. Like I did a bunch of like the school sports. Like I played soccer on the side, then I did like school basketball, school volleyball, and a bunch of like the intramural teams just for like my elementary school. But it was taking up so much time of that, but I kept missing a little bit of swimming. And he was like, he didn't want me to be like, you have to decide, but if you're gonna be a good swimmer, you kind of have to be a little bit selfish in the same sense. Being like you kind of can't do both if you want to be good at one. So I understood what he was trying to say. So that's when I kind of decided to step away from the other sports and just focus on swimming. And that's when it kind of completely changed, is when I put a lot of effort into being the best swimmer that I could be at the time at the age of 12, 13, as good as I could ever be. And that's when I really just like distinctly remember things changing, especially when I got sick, because I got mono actually in grade 8 when I was 13. So I ended up going through 2 months of just having mono as just the symptoms. So I ended up going to a bunch of different, it was my own fault anyways. I ended up getting sick, but then I went to a whole bunch of camps. It was like the try meet whenever it was. Then there's like a bunch of other camps, and then I had to do track and field for my school because it was mandatory for my school grade, and just like participation, all that stuff. But it happened to be on the 2 hottest days of the entire summer. So I ended up just running myself down and getting sick, and that's when I got mono. So at that point, we went to, I think it was AGI, and it was the Friday or the Thursday when we had to do a 200 free, and I was seated like second or something like that. And I ended up coming second last because I ended up adding like 15 seconds onto my 200 free time. And my coach was like up looking up to my parents in the stands, was like, no, she's done. Like, I'm going to send her home. And that's when we went to the doctors. And my mom was like, do you want to try and swim tomorrow? Like, are you sure? And I was like, no, I think like I should listen to my coach and not swim. Ended up going to the doctors, taking some blood tests, came back with the results on Monday, it being mono. And I was absolutely devastated at the time, being 12, because it was like, this is your whole world now.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of really disappointing to hear. So we went and talked to my coach and talked him through it. And he was like, okay, so this is what we're going to do. We ended up taking the first week off because it was just all the symptoms. And I ended up having to take a little bit more time off. I ended up having to take an extra week off because my liver swelled to 4 times the size it should have been.
Oh my.
It's not healthy at all.
Not at
So
all.
they were really concerned. I couldn't do anything at school either. I had to take the full week and a half, 2 weeks off of school too, because if I got hit in the gym or knocked over, it could have, as terrible as it sounds, it could have exploded and gotten like myself could have been, I could have like gotten really injured or really sick or
Wow.
even something worse. So I ended up having to take 2 weeks off of school and then slowly get back into the pool. I was only swimming once per day for an hour, which was like warm up, and I couldn't dive. I had to go last in the lane because if everyone caught me, then they were just going to pass me just in case I got hit. Not diving, barely turning, doing like a lot of kick, a lot of pull, a lot of low intensity stuff. Then we slowly started to build up, being like, okay, the next week can go up to an hour and 20 minutes, then an hour and 40 minutes the weekend after, then finally up to 2 hours, but nothing hard, and then slowly building up more intensity throughout. But every Friday, I still had to go into life labs and just get my blood taken to make sure my white blood cell count was coming up, because I actually ended up having a really low white blood cell count because of it. In a vial, I think you're supposed to have anywhere between 7 to 11. My white blood cell count was at 4 at the time.
Oh, wow.
So I wasn't fighting off any infections. It was just kind of sitting there, and I had to do that for another additional 3 months. And it was just one of those things where it's like, wow, like this is going on for a really long time. Like it's May now at this point. Now it's June, and then it's July, and we're coming up to age groups at the end of July, beginning of August. And I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to go. So I ended up not going to provincials that year, but I went to age groups in Calgary at the time. And it was one of those things where my coach was like, yeah, we didn't know if you were going to come at all.
Yeah.
and it didn't put me in a bunch of races. I didn't swim that great, but it was just one of those experiences that I still wanted to try.
Hmm.
So it was like, okay, just kind of do your best. We're not really expecting too much from you, considering you've basically just taken 2 months off of swimming because you're sick. So the greatest part of that meet was my parents couldn't come, but they were watching the live stream. But a bunch of the other parents came and were like cheering me on. And I ended up somehow didn't I was having such a bad meet that I just didn't want to swim in finals anymore. And it was the last day. I was so tired. I was so grumpy about the meet being so bad that I ended up missing finals in the 100 back at the time, which I didn't think I was a backstroker at the time. And I somehow got scratched in the finals because someone decided not to swim the 100 back. And I was like, oh, great. Like, now I have to swim 100 back. I'm going to be in lane 8. Like, this is the last thing I want to do at 13 years old. Like, this kind of sucks. Ended up having to swim the race out of lane 8 with all of my teammates who were there standing in lane 8, the very end of the Calgary pool. I was so freaked out because I saw all of them there and I was like, wow, like I really don't want to see anyone watching this race. And my parents are on there on the live stream watching, but somehow the live stream cut out right before the end of the race. And so my parents didn't know what happened. And they had all the parents texting them, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And my parents are like, I don't know what happened. Like the live stream completely cut out. No idea what happened, but apparently somehow I managed to touch third. And that was probably the biggest reward out of the entire season for me. Just knowing being sick for 2-3 months and then having the ability to touch third out of the blue. It wasn't a great time for me, but at the same time, it was one of those things where it was like, wow, this is really weird, but it was super rewarding.
Absolutely. And did you find I know at a young age, but that's where you learn things, right? Through the adversity, right? You're humming along as a young kid and all of a sudden you get sick and you have never been sick like that before. And then okay, it'll be a week. It'll be 2 weeks. And the next thing was 3 months. In a way, it kind of prepared you for what we're dealing with right now. Of course, you're not sick right now, but oh, it might be 2 weeks. It might be 3 weeks. Here we are, we're on week 8. And then the other thing is you got to see that you didn't want to do the race. You're like, oh, this is going to be brutal. This isn't going to go well. So you probably didn't have a lot of expectations and you just got up and swam.
Yeah, I did it in a practice suit because that's all I had at the time. And I did it with a blue practice suit that was probably threadbare up this back. And yeah, I didn't have any expectations going into the race. I was like, okay, one more race and then I'm done. It's summer. I can take some time off and just kind of come back in September and try again.
So did it give you confidence then going in and winning that medal in a training suit in lane 8 in a race after mono? Like, okay, you know what? I was a setback, but I'm going to be all right. Did it give you that confidence?
It did, but it did. I didn't think I didn't realize it at the time, knowing because it was still I was still kind of sick going into it. So I didn't really have any expectations or didn't really have any confidence really too much going into the race either. But coming out of it, I was like, wow, I came third out of the blue. I wasn't expecting to come third. I should practice this some more. Maybe you'll end up being really, really good. But it was still the summer. And so I was like, yeah, I'm just happy that now I have another month to recover before going back into the pool and trying again for the next season. And that's when it kind of hit me when I still had my coach for that season. Absolutely loved him. He was probably one of my favorite coaches. And next year he was like, I know you were sick last season, but this season we're going to work really, really hard. Make sure you don't get sick. And we're going to take that confidence from the last race you went for the 100 back and put it into this season.
So I have a couple of questions. And like I said, I like to listen to what you're saying and ask questions. So at the time, were you swimming with Hans at the time?
No,
not Hans. Sorry. No. Sorry. That's the wrong name. What am I thinking about right now? Ulf. Sorry. I get never mixed up.
Ulf at the time.
Yeah. So you're with Ulf at the time. I've heard amazing things about Ulf. I actually had some friends that swam at the university who swam with Ulf back when he was in Mississauga in a different club called Ace that doesn't exist anymore. So you're with Ulf at that time. And the other thing I wanted to ask you was, you mentioned doing multi-sports, and I love this for young kids when they do different sports. I think you mentioned you played, what was it again? You played basketball?
It was school basketball, school volleyball. There's badminton in there for a little bit, soccer, actually house league soccer, and then swimming as well, plus other stuff on the side as well.
So with all those sports, what I love about young people doing multiple, that was me. I did a ton of different sports. I did every kind of sport. And what it does is, even though you're a swimmer, one of the things that really irritates me is when people say oh, well, I'm not an athlete, I'm a swimmer. That drives me completely insane, because you're an athlete. You're a tremendous athlete. But do you feel like having done individual sports, team sports, having developed your athleticism in different areas and different coordination, do you think a lot of that helped you in your swimming career?
I really do, because I definitely helped me try different things and learn what sort of not really like understand them at the time, but learn like what are my strengths. Like I'm not a terrible runner, but I'm not the best runner out there. And that was like especially for soccer. But I also got to learn to work as a team, especially when you're only going to see them for one season. You're going to see recognized face coming back. Some people won't come back. Learn about different aspects of athleticism and what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And just there's just so many little aspects that I learned but didn't realize at the time, just being at such a young age.
Mhm. It's funny that you mentioned that too. And there's something you touched on that I think is so relevant to a lot of people, because you hear this a lot. Like, it's really great when you're older and you need that core group of teammates and you need to have your training mates, and you need a core group, like absolutely when you're a senior athlete. But when you're young, it's like a lot of kids don't realize, well, I want to be with my friends forever. And it doesn't really work that way when you come through sports, right? So what you've learned with different sports and moving up in different ages and going through the swim program is learning how to have a lot of different teammates, learning how to deal with a lot of different coaches, learning how to have different communication styles. I think that's one of the more undervalued aspects of developing a really good young person, young athlete, is having that diversity of teammates and coaches. So do you feel like that was something that helped you as well to be able to mold and adapt to your situation, especially moving from club out west to come to a center and have different coaches and teammates?
Oh yeah, for sure. The way the club is set up back in Newmarket is they go by age rather than speed. So in the beginning, you end up going through. They had like AG1, AG2, and then they go like national senior and senior groups. But every couple years, you end up switching to a new coach just because of the age and like what they covered. So I
Mm-hmm.
think I had one of the coaches for Splash who ended up being one of the assistant coaches with Alan later, who came in and did ended up going back to working mostly with the Splash kids. Then you move up through the like development 1, development 2, development 3. Then you go into age group swimming, and then you go into the national senior programs. But I think I had like upwards of like 5 coaches, 6 coaches, just going through the entirety of the Newmarket Stingrays like club. And it was just wild because each coach had such a different perspective on swimming and how to coach swimming. But all in all, it ended up being the same. But it was really cool to see how someone else taught something, rather than if you didn't understand it, they tried to do it a different way. And if you went to a different coach the year after, you ended up learning it the same thing, but just in a completely different way, which was really cool because obviously everyone's going to have a different style of learning. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what you need to like work with. You got to figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And especially with the way it being age, yes, you were with people your age going throughout the entirety of the club, but there's definitely people who were fast or like way faster than some people at swimming, but you got to learn to work together in the club. And you got to work with people who are a year younger, a year older, depending on what group you were in, which coach would come back in, which coach would leave and have a sub coach come in. It was just really cool to see how many different people there were working with you, even if you didn't realize it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's fun when you look back, and basically what you described is like one year you might be the youngster in the group, the next year you might be the leader, and then different coaches. And there's the saying, right? It takes a village to raise a successful young person, right? And you really did have a village at Newmarket. It sounds like that we're invested in developing young people and raising them all the way through.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely not only the parents and the coaches, but definitely the other teammates that I had. I ended up making a bunch of different friends because I originally was with a year older, and
Mhm.
then they held me back just to keep me with my actual age year. And that's when I met so many new people, and they still are some of the best friends that I've had, even though we obviously don't talk as much because most of them are back in Ontario or like Quebec or even down in the States. We still connect and we still keep connected. And it's just really cool to see how like we've seen each other grow up, how long we've been together, how much we've changed, how much we've adapted to everything and worked together, and how we've helped each other too.
It's funny. I talked to a lot of different swimmers and different people in the sport, and they always say the same thing. Like the friends and connections they made whenever they were coming up in club, they still have those connections. And usually, the thing that people say is like, we can go months without speaking, and then pick up a conversation like we spoke yesterday. And I think those are the bonds and connections you make with teammates through this sport. I think you make it in other sports and other areas, but I mean, selfishly, we're swimmers and we do swimming. So, but it's that unique bond that you form with people that kind of lasts for, I guess, a lifetime, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like there's a couple of my friends from Ontario. back from the same club in Newmarket that one went to Waterloo and then took a year off. One went to McGill. And I didn't really talk to them too much just because we've all been so busy and it's hard to kind of find times to communicate and talk, especially with classes and practice and just all the other little things that you're doing, especially a 3-hour time change if they're all on the East Coast and here I am on the West Coast trying to find stuff like that to time. But we still managed to actually sit down and talk, even if it's a couple months or every couple months or every 6 months, we still find it like sit down, find time to talk. And like you said, it's pick up like we've never left, like you said.
Yeah, it's nice to have those bonds. So now I'm curious. So you've had everything kind of really got rolling pretty aggressively. So I'm just going to run through a few things. I don't write much down, but just you have so many career highlights. So just tell me about your junior highlights. So 2013, you were on Team Ontario for Canada Games, right? So I think that was in Sherbrooke, if I'm not mistaken. So there's that Canada Games. Then 2014, you had a big year. You had the Youth Olympics. You had the Junior Pan Pacific Championships. And then you also went to the Australian Youth Tour.
Yes.
So that was a big year there. At the Junior Pan Pacs, I think you won, was a silver in the 100 back. You won a bronze medal as part of the 400 medley relay. You made a bunch of finals at the Summer Youth Olympics. I think you had 4 finals at that meet. 2015 went to the Junior Worlds, won a bronze medal in the 50 back. And then 2016 back to Junior Pan Pacs where you won a silver medal as part of the relay and had another final. So you had a lot of Team Canada junior success, and then also Team Ontario for Canada Games, having been a part of that program at Newmarket. So I have a couple of questions. One kind of stems to coming up and being a top ranked swimmer and going and being on all those teams and having those experiences. It was common for people that came through your club, right? Like you had a lot of really fast teammates. There's a lot of kids that came through Newmarket. And I'm just curious how it was going through those experiences, following in the footsteps, if there was any pressure, because like Lindsay Seaman came along, and I'm sure like you're going through the age groups and those club records are fast. And obviously she went to the Olympics when she was 15, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm curious about how those junior teams shaped your career and taught what they taught you, but also what it was like if there was pressure coming up in a club that you were following some really great swimmers, if you felt any pressure from that, or if that was exciting and motivating to kind of chase a swimmer that went on and had that type of success.
It's a little bit of both. Like I don't want to say I had a lot of pressure, but I definitely was compared to Lindsay at the time. But at the same time, they remembered that I wasn't Lindsay for the most part. Like obviously we swam similar strokes, even though she ended up swimming more of the distance freestyle stuff as well. And I swam more of the stroke stuff. But I definitely was compared to her. And in the end, like it ended up being like, you know what, like I am a different person, but it was also really cool to see like, okay, let's go chase those times. Let's go break those times. Let's go break those club records. Let's kind of keep going and keep moving forward, especially with Ulf. Like I told him, I think at the beginning of this season, when I turned 14 or going into the 14, like year 14 for provincials, I was like, okay, well, I kind of want to break the national age group record for the 100 back. Like, I don't really know how close I'm going to get, but like, I feel like I could try to do it. And at the time, I think it was 101. And then and ended up Mackenzie Glover broke it at Westerns when it was back in February when it was short course. And so we're going through and I was like, okay, like I want to see if I can try to break it. Like it'd be kind of fun to see if I can do it. If not, that's totally fine. I still put my best effort into it and ended up breaking the record totally out of the blue. Didn't think I was going to go 59 at the time for a 14-year-old. And I was like, didn't know what this was about. But I think just going through and having those times to chase really set me up well for the next steps and trying to just keep going and making those teams and just putting goals in front of myself to see if I can catch them and make them and pass them and set new goals and new heights and just keep going.
So when you went through and you broke that national age group record, because I know sometimes for instance, you came up and you were a good swimmer, but when you do that and you kind of thrust yourself into more of a spotlight as a young swimmer, there's a lot of extra attention around the pool deck, right? Like there's a lot of coaches that are saying congratulations or swimmers that are congratulating you that you've never spoken to before. And if you could just kind of talk about like, how did that feel and kind of like, what would you say to another? Because I like what you said, there's one thing, right? So like, you're not going to be Lindsay Seaman. You're not going to be the next Lindsay Seaman. You're going to be the first Danielle Hanus, right? Like, and that's the thing is like, yes, the times are there, but you're your own person. So I'm glad you mentioned that because that was the point I wanted to make. So I'm glad you said that. But then dealing with the pressures of, or maybe perceived pressure or the attention, I guess, with kind of having that success. How was that? Was it overwhelming? Was it just take it in stride? Did you notice it? Like, how was that for you? Because some swimmers have different feelings about that.
Like I did notice it, but at the same time, at the moment, I was pretty dazed because I didn't really know what I just did. So
Yeah.
I kind of was like, "Oh wow, like I went pretty fast. Like that's pretty fast for a 14-year-old. Did not think I was going to be going that fast. I thought maybe like 1 minute because at the time I think it was like 101, like really low, like 101.0 or something like that. I was like, okay, maybe I can break it by like a tenth or a couple tenths, not a couple seconds. I was so just floored at the time more than anything when everyone was like when I was passing people like or new people that were passing me or people sitting on the bench and saw me, they were like, congratulations. I was like, oh, thank you. Like, thanks so much. It means a lot. And then even my coach, he was like, that was a near perfect swim. And it was Wolf at the time. He's like, that was awesome. It was a near perfect swim. Okay, go swim down, get ready for the relay. He kind of, in a way, he didn't disregard the entire swim. He said, he was really proud of me. It was a great swim, but he didn't want it to go straight to my head because there's definitely other things still to do. So it wasn't the fact that I didn't need to break the record and he'd be like, okay, yeah, sure. Okay, cool. Good job. It was more like, okay, it was great. Don't like forget you still have the relay. There's still things to focus on. There's still stuff to focus on. Maybe do it and prepare, go for the relay and then celebrate after and don't get swept up into the commotion of breaking a NAG record.
It's funny because that is a great coach who says you don't get too high, you don't get too low, kept you balanced, kept you like enjoyed the moment, but kept you even keeled. There's a saying I always joke with my swimmers. It's like, listen, guys, if we have a great swim, we're not going to book our ticket to Tokyo right away. And if we have a poor swim, we're not going to go play in traffic. Let's keep it in perspective here, right? So I like it when coaches have that balance with their swimmers to kind of manage it all. So that kind of like started off something that was really great. You had a great junior career. So as you walked through all those junior meets and you started to have that Team Canada junior experience, and I mean, I know from 2014, like that was one that we were on that junior team, but you weren't really there a lot with us because you were one of four. I think there was four of you that went to Youth Olympics, right? It was a small group that went with Alan to Youth Olympics.
Yeah, it was Danica Zinga, Matt Glover, Kelsey Wog, and I were
Yeah.
the four girls who went to Youth Olympics and then went to Junior Pan Packs after, yeah.
Yeah, so like that at a young age is a crazy summer because we did our staging camp in Victoria, then we flew to Hawaii. But if you were in, I think was it Singapore? No, is that right?
It was Nanjing.
Nanjing. So you went there and then you flew from there to Hawaii. So what a lot of people don't know is by the time you got to Junior Pan Packs, you four girls had been run through the ringer. You had traveled, you had been exhausted, and you still had a great swim meet at Junior Pan Packs. And I know for me, like that was a really fun team. We had a real good time on that team.
That was definitely one of my favorite teams by far.
Yeah, I think we were the bronze medal champions that meet because we won so many bronze medals, but we won medals that it was swimming into medals that weren't supposed to medal. And I think that was part of the fun of that team. And then I know that from a coaching perspective, the coaching staff got on so well, and then the athletes got on well. So the vibe was just fun and positive, and everyone was pretty engaged. So that was a really good time, not to mention a beautiful venue. So if you go through that junior success, like how hard was it as a young swimmer to go and do all of that travel and maintain your level of focus and be able to get up and race? Or were you just like, okay, I'm tired. I'm going to race. I'm just going to stay in the moment and race the best I can and see what happens. Like, what was your mindset going through that challenging travel time?
It definitely was something along the lines of, okay, remember, like you're still there to race, but also whatever happens, still have fun. You definitely, like you said, we've been through the ringer. We were already at a 6-day long meet, which is a fairly long, which is a really long meet to begin with. And then if you're like sitting days in and days off, depending on how many events you're swimming, it's a long meet. And then going straight into, for Junior Pan Pac, straight into another 4-day meet. At that point, you're racing 10 days. And if you're swimming one event a day, that's another race, however many you're swimming. And if you make finals, that's another race. And if you have relays, then it's another race. So you're just one of those things, you're like, okay, you know what? Yeah, you're tired, but just go out there, give it your all, do your best. That's all that really matters. And just enjoying the moment. Because especially with that team and coming from a super small team of 7 people, just doing mixed relays and women's relays on Youth Olympic Games in Nanjing, going to this massive 30-person team out of the blue. And you're just like, oh, wow, this is so overwhelming. There's so many people. Like, I don't know what to do. But it was great because I think one of the most memorable moments out of that team was probably the first day we got there when everyone else either got there, like, I think it was like an hour or two after we did, just because the way the flights timed up, was Danica Ludlow was the first person who came up to me and was like, you guys swam so well, and then gave me a hug and was like, how are you doing? Like, if you need anything, like, talk to us, come chat with us. Like, you guys swam so well. And it was so crazy because I've never met Danica in my life. And she was the nicest person, the first person to come up to us and be like, you guys swim so well, give us a hug. And then like everyone came up and was like, good job, you guys swim so well into the meet. And here we are 3 days out of the meet with this huge 30-person team we're trying to learn everyone's name is and get cohesive with, and everyone's already been with for over a week now. And so we're like, okay, like this is weird, but everyone was so welcoming and so kind and so nice and so positive at the meet because they all knew how tired we were, and the fact that people were still medaling out of our group for our swim group and still doing really, really well. And we're just like, this is crazy. And the fact that it was there's so much energy on the side of the pool deck and so many positive emotions. It was by far my favorite team and summer that I can remember from juniors, like being a junior athlete.
Yeah, that one was so much fun. I think Danica was one of the team captains on the women's side as well, right? And she did a great job. No, it was a great team, and it's interesting to see how many swimmers from that team that have gone on to senior success, right? And I mean, obviously, I'm biased because I got to share that experience with everybody, but it was a lot of fun. I really think that whole experience launched a lot of careers for people because it was an enjoyable experience, and people kind of swam up. And I just remember seeing faces after they swam a big swim or something that they had never done before, didn't think was possible. So it was a lot of fun. So from there, you went to the World Juniors the next year. You won a bronze medal in the 50 back, then back to Junior Pan Packs and did all that in 2016. And then you had to make the decision. You're going to move on to the next phase of your career. So going through that process is tough for anybody. I mean, you're going to weigh your university options in Canada. You're going to weigh your university options in the United States. I'm fairly confident you receive scholarship offers and people who are trying to recruit you. And then you have the high performance center option. So can you walk me through how that process was for you? Was there anybody from a coaching or family perspective that helped you, kind of guided you to support you in making the decision? What was that process like? Because it can be daunting and overwhelming. And I think at the end of the day, you chose HPC-Victoria and UVic, and that's worked out quite well for you. So I'm just wondering how that process went for you.
I definitely will not lie to you. It was the scariest and most daunting experience, like you said, that there was. It's a really big decision to begin with, but it's also a really hard decision because you have to do something. You don't really think about it at the time, but you have to do something that will be the best for you. And you don't really know what will be the best for you at the time. So in a way, it's kind of a gamble, but at the same time, if you go down and you meet the coaches and you meet the team and you end up clicking and having really good vibes with the team, then it's definitely a positive step towards something that definitely you might like. For me, I know I went down on a bunch of recruiting trips. I think I went to NC State, Texas A&M, and then a couple other schools to look. And they were offering me scholarships and stuff like that. But I found for me that it wasn't what I wanted to do. I enjoyed, like, as much as it would be cool to stay down in the States and swim off scholarship and go to NC2As, I was like, oh, well, what about trials and long course? Like, their season is short course yards for the majority of it. And then when I was talking to one of the schools, they were like, oh yeah, during Olympic year, we train on like 1 day a week long course. And I was like, oh wow, like that doesn't really seem like a lot, because I know for me back in Ontario, swimming for Newmarket, we didn't have a long course pool. There wasn't really many available in Ontario. So going through it was just like, oh yeah, well, like this is great to be one long course, but at the same time I could go train long course over here in Victoria or at some of the other centers 3, 4, 5 times a week, if not a little bit more. So it was one of those things that definitely was weighing for me, but it's a really big, hard, long process, and you got to sit down. And one of the people, or a couple of the people who really helped me were my parents for sure, because they sat down with me and they're like, okay, if you don't know what you're doing, write down where you want, like where you're looking at, write down pros and cons of each, weigh the options. If you like the options, okay, put it in a pro school, or like, okay, look at the school. If not, put it in like maybe a different school would be better for you. And even for that, with all the centers too. And I was just like, this is a crazy experience. The fact that Ryan was coming up and was like, hey, like, we really, really like you. We're thinking if you wanted to come out here and swim with the center, like that'd totally be available for you. And I was like, wow, that's such a crazy thing, because the center is the center. They don't really offer it to everyone. So it's one of those things where it's like, wow, like I don't really know what to say. And then I went out on a trip there before for trials the previous year when it was World Trials in 2015. And I was like, wow, it's so pretty out here. I love the mountains and the ocean, the air, and I love the pool. The pool is fantastic. Like, there's nothing you can really complain about at Saanich. And I was just going through and I was like, you know what, like I think I've made my decision, but I wasn't 100% sure. And then I ended up going on a trip to the Netherlands with Alan Wrigley, Alan Swanson at the time, and a couple of other coaches like Bill and Kevin. And we were just going through and we're just like sitting there and talking. And that's when I talked to Ken McKinnon, and he was just like helping me explain and going through choices and options. And that's when I really knew what I wanted to do. And that's when I kind of emailed down in the States and I was like, thank you so much for the offer, but I'm going to stay here in Canada. But it's a daunting process. And Ken McKinnon and my coaches, like Ryan and Brad and Alan and my parents were the most supportive out of all of it, for sure. And it's a crazy experience, especially going through grade 12. And you've already got a bunch of stuff to worry about, graduating schools and grades, just trying to get into school for university and just going through picking a school at that point. It's a really big process, but definitely take your time with it, enjoy the moment, and like definitely go visit the schools if you can.
Yeah.
But if not, just do your best, talk with it with people is the best like advice I can give for that, because they're like other people have your best interests at heart. And so you kind of just have to talk them through it and be like, hey, I don't know what I want to do. And that's what my parents did. And that's what Ken McKinnon did for me as well. And I really appreciate it because here I am now living on the West Coast, happier than ever.
Well, and it's funny, like I sit down and I've helped so many swimmers through the process, and they always say like, you're not telling me anything. All you do is keep asking me questions. And I said, yeah, because I'm not going to tell you where to go. And I'm curious if I'm giving good advice or not. So I'm going to ask you this scenario. So when I talk to a swimmer, I always say like, you have to really go through the process and do the evaluation. I'm not going to tell you what I think of any of those places or those coaches because I want you to experience it for yourself if you have the ability to do a recruiting trip. So, but really do the pros and cons list and go through everything. Said, but what I always tell them at the end is I ask them questions and talk about each school, and I wait till the one where they sound the most excited, because you see that tone of voice, you can kind of sense it.
Mhm.
And then I always say, like, in your heart, you're going to know, like, this feels right, the teammates feel right, the coaches feel right, like it just feels like it's a right fit for me, and you've got to trust your instincts, because at the end of the day, we can all guide and support athletes, but your family, you're the one who's got to go live it, right? And you're the one who's got to go be successful with it. And I hesitate to tell any swimmer what to do. Some of them have asked me, just tell me what to do. I was like, I'm not going to do that. But it's tough. Like, you did the right thing and you had all of your options available to you, but then it becomes, oh my God, I have to choose between all of these options that are all really good. So am I giving the right advice when I talk to swimmers then? Is that kind of
I would definitely say you're giving the right advice. You obviously, like you said, you can't make the decision for them, so they're going to have to make the decision. But all you can do is kind of guide them on the right path by asking them questions. And like you said, whatever they sound the most excited about, being like, okay, maybe make that one of your options. You seem really excited about that. Look more into it. And definitely making the pros and cons list. But yeah, you definitely can't make the decision for you. And you can't really tell them what they're going to do, because even if you did make the decision for them and they ended up hating it, then they're going to be like, oh, you made this worst decision for me. It's like, well, at the same time, it's like, I can't really make that decision because it's a life altering decision and it's not really something you can make for someone else.
Absolutely not, right? They have to go through that process. Um, so I want to ask you, with making the move to Victoria and moving so far from home, and I don't know how close you are with your parents or if you're like really a homebody type person, but that's a big transition and moving out. And you were probably 17 or 18 years old. You're young. You're moving away from home, moving 5,000 kilometers away. It's a 4.5, 5 hour flight. How was that transition for you? The first, I don't know, 6 months, year, like just making that transition. Was it smooth? Did you have challenges? Like, because I know a lot of kids will move and go away from home, and just like that's hard on anybody.
Yeah, it was really, really hard for sure, especially because university's challenging and it's
Mhm.
crazy. Like, you get to pick your schedule, yeah, but at the same time, you have so much more responsibility living on your own or living in dorms, because you gotta feed yourself, you gotta do your homework and do your readings, keep on top of that. And if you're doing practices, you gotta keep on top of practices, doing all that stuff. Like, I'm a really big family person, so like me and my parents are really, really close. But at the same time, it was kind of funny because I ended up going to junior pan pack. So I left like the middle of August. So I was already on a trip. So I left home already, went
Oh,
to
wow.
a team, did that, and then went straight back to Victoria instead of going home to Toronto and Newmarket. And so I just kind of was like, okay, let's just stay on this side of the country. Might as well. It's a little bit easier. instead of flying all the way back just to fly here. My parents just flew out from Toronto just to come meet me, bring me some extra clothes that I obviously couldn't fit in my suitcases, take some of the random Swim Canada bags and stuff that I didn't really need. But yeah, it was definitely a crazy time. It was weird. It's really hard the first year, but I would suggest definitely keeping in touch with your parents, having them there as a support. Because for me, I call my parents every day or every other day, and I talk to them, but at the same time, it was still so weird because it was the first time really living on my own for such a long period of time. Like, yeah, I've been on camps for that have gone on for a couple weeks or a couple months or a month, especially when you're going from like junior pan packs or juniors to seniors to the staging camp for like if it was the 2013 year, some people went to just Sheerbrook, and then people went to straight after into Junior Worlds that year in Dubai. So some people were gone for like 9 weeks. So it was a really long time. But living away from home for the first time for the first year of university was really, really hard. And I experienced that. I didn't think it was going to be as hard as it was, but it definitely was. But I learned to push through it in a way, as terrible as it sounds. I kind of learned to just keep going. Yeah, it sucked. Yeah, I didn't enjoy myself as much as I thought I was going to. I still had a ton of friends and still enjoyed that aspect, but still my swimming the first year was a little bit not where I wanted to be, but I also learned the fact that it was like, okay, so it's also my first year out here. It's still my first year of university. I kind of have to learn to balance the two a little bit better. So I kind of pushed through it in a terrible way and just kind of kept going. I was like, okay, make yourself goals, trying to find positives in little things. And I worked a lot with Shar through that and through the second year and the third year, even until now too.
So yeah, so it's a tough transition, and obviously, like, yeah, sometimes you just gotta, as maybe bad as it sounds, you just gotta white knuckle and push your way through, right, and adapt. And I think that's the attitude or the personality of an elite athlete, right? Like, you have to adapt and conquer, and that's how you've managed to have this success. Is just having that mindset, right? It's not ideal, it's not easy sometimes, but that's really good advice. Like, if you need, pick up the phone, call your parents. Don't ever feel like you have to sit there and feel sad or lonely. Like, make the phone call. Don't be afraid to reach out. I always try to encourage people to do that. So obviously, it went well for you. You've been so decorated as an athlete with the bikes, and you've broken a number of school records. You've broken some Can West records. You've had tons of success, and you haven't done a university meet on taper, right? You've been in work the whole time. So you had the FISUs in 2017, Pan Pacific Championships in 2018, and that was your first senior team experience. Like senior A team, I should say, because you did the FISUs in 17, and you made a couple of semis at FISUs, and then going into the Pan Pacific Championships, you made 3 finals, and then it led into the 2019 Pan American Games. So the thing that I found fascinating is that when you left high school, you came out and you're predominantly kind of known, I guess, as a backstroker at that point. But since making the move out west, you kind of have redeveloped and got into butterfly again and had some really good success in fly. Your freestyle has come a long way as well, and you've kind of rounded things out. So it's been an interesting evolution from the age group Danielle that had a lot of success to now the senior Danielle who had a lot of success. What was part of the thought process, or have you enjoyed kind of bringing butterfly back into the equation and adjusting who you are as a swimmer as an adult and some of the events that you focus on?
It's definitely been a weird transition because after FISU definitely wasn't my best meet. I was pretty disappointed with myself. I was really stressed out about everything in the meet, and it definitely wasn't where I wanted to be, especially because after I ended up losing my karting, and then there's just a bunch of other things that kind of like, well, if you couldn't get your karting back the year after, we'll have to probably take you out of the center and drop you down to next gen, which was pretty disappointing. So the way after, I was like, there's just a lot of stuff riding on this next year. And I was like, you know what? Like, I really don't like the 200 back. It stresses me out way too much, and it's not my best race. So I sat down with Ryan. I talked to him. I was like, Ryan, do you think this is at the beginning of the year when we each kind of have our own little 5-10 minute meetings with him or Brad? And we're just like, okay, you know what, Ryan, this year, do you think it'd be possible? Could I swim more butterfly? He was like, that means we'll probably put you in a couple of 200 flies. Would you be okay with that? And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? Like, there's nothing to lose. If I'll switch it out for the 200 back, that's totally fine. And then as the year kind of progressed, I realized I was a lot better at the 200 fly than I was the 200 back. And it was just one of those really funny things where he's like, wow, your 200 fly is actually pretty good. And I was like, yeah, it's way better than my 200 back. And I just swam 200 fly and said he's like, sure. So even since then, I don't think I've swam a 200 back in like 2 years now. And I'm like, that's fine with me. They're like, do you like the 200 fly? Like the 200 fly is hard. I was like, yeah, the 200 fly is hard in the moment, but like 200 back hurts like 20 minutes after the race is done. And I'm like, I'll take the like when it hurts in the moment rather than what hurts 20 minutes after. And that's the same thing with Hillary. We even knew, like the two of us joked about it. We're just like, oh yeah, the 200 back hurts like 20 minutes after you're done. There's no getting away from that, like at all.
It's so, and it's interesting because that 200 flies just kept getting better and better and better and better since you kind of reintroduced yourself to swimming it, right? Um, so as you went through, so you lost your karting after the 16-17 season, and then 17-18 you had to get it back, and you had that extra stress and pressure, and it was kind of the first year where you didn't have that kind of big uptick, right? Like you weren't swimming as well as you wanted to be. It was a lot of transition, university, all that. But then in 2018, you had a bang in trials. And that year the trials were actually in the summertime, so you had the full year to get to that point. But you had a great trials. Then you made the senior A team, go to Pan Pacs, and that was your first A team experience. So you got your karting back and you got all that process. But how was it to kind of work your way through that year with that stress and pressure, and then have the reward at the end of the year of achieving the goal of making the top senior team that year?
It was really rewarding. It was really hard at the beginning of the year, especially knowing like you lost your card and you have to work really, really hard this year. And even I said to myself, and I was talking to our sports psych Charlene a lot that year. I think I talked to her every couple of weeks for the entire year to just keep slowly. Ryan and Brad had this saying at the time, move an inch a day. Even like by the end of, even if you're moving an inch a day, at some point you're gonna be miles ahead of where you were previously. And that's kind of stuck with me throughout the whole time being here. And I thought that was a really good saying because for me, it was definitely taking myself out of the really hard, dark mental times that I was in, especially after plateauing, being the first year of university, being in such a dark time and hard time for me personally. I was like, wow, like this is really hard. This isn't definitely where I wanted to be. I definitely wanted to be way faster or way at a way different spot in my career, but here I am. So I'm going to have to deal with it. So just going through talking to Charlene, learning to be like finding the positives in each little aspect, whether that be practice or a race or a competition, and just making goals off that and finding little other positive things to keep building and going off of. And just in the end, we're like, you know what? Don't really worry too much about the race plan. Obviously, try to do your best with the race plan, but go be Danielle, do Danielle. And that's what like our whole year's motto was for. And like even now, like I still do it. I write 3 positive things that I find throughout my day every night just to recap the day, just to remind myself there are positive things, no matter where you can find them, no matter how hard it is or how dark it is, whatever's going on, there's always 3 positive things you can find. And that's what I've kind of kept through. I've obviously taken some weeks off in the summer just to like recuperate and take my time away from everything. But there's definitely like that's what stuck with me for sure. And I still do it today, even like I think it's like 3 years later. Even then, like that definitely helped me going through the year and just slowly working through everything to find the positives and just keep doing me. And that was the best advice that I could get.
I absolutely love that. Find 3 things. Like I often, the one I always use is like, guys, it's really easy to find a negative or find a reason why we're not going to succeed, but you just got to figure out one reason why you're going to succeed and just stick to that, right? Like stick to the positive things. One thing I want to ask you, because you mentioned a lot, it sounds like Charlene has had a big impact on you in your time in Victoria. And I don't know if you had access to her before that, but in Victoria for sure, she's had a really strong impact on you. And I know a lot of young athletes, I talked to Tristan Cote about this, and a lot of young athletes have a hard time wrapping their head around sports psych or a psychologist like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. And they don't understand it. No, there's nothing wrong with you, but it's giving you tools to deal with pressures that most young people don't have to deal with and expectation and the schedule you have to run. So Charlene it sounds like she's had a massive, massive impact on you, and how fortunate or how blessed have you been to have her and have her work with you and teach you the things she's taught you?
I am so beyond lucky to have Charlene, like have worked with Charlene even for like a year, let alone 3. She's had such a massive impact, not only on like my mental health and my mental performance, just like as my health and my well-being as a general person outside of the pool. There's so many positive things that I could take away from just the teaching she's taught me, like about swimming and about the pool and about competition and about racing and practicing. I can implement into my everyday life outside the pool, whether that be school or family life or anything else or friendships, relationships, whatever it may be. There's so many different things I can take and change them slightly to fit where I need them to be. But she's had such a massive impact along with everyone else here. It's been absolutely unbelievable. And it's been such a rewarding experience just being able to work with her for the past 3 years.
Absolutely. No, I think it's fantastic. And I always tell people, like, surround yourself with really great people, and you need that support network. And that's going to allow you to be successful and be your best self, basically. So a lot of the stuff kind of carried through, and it culminated last summer. You had just an outstanding Pan Am Games, right? You won 4 silver medals. You swam unbelievably well. But there's a couple of pieces about that Pan Am's that I want to draw from earlier experience. So I think going back to what we talked about in 2014 about the travel and the schedule and how tired you were, most people don't know how challenging and difficult the Pan Am Games were. You guys had late prelim swims, you had really late final swims, late meals, you weren't getting to bed until 1 a.m. You weren't leaving the pool till after midnight sometimes. Like, it was a hard grind to go and do the Pan Am Games. So I'm just curious from your perspective, like, you had a great meet, but can you talk about how maybe the previous team's experiences prepared you to deal with not the easiest circumstances for a swimmer?
Yeah, definitely. That's probably the best way to describe it. Pan Am Games was a grind from start to finish. For Faith and I, coming from out here in Victoria, they wanted to get us a direct flight to Montreal, but obviously there are none from the island, so we flew directly to Toronto, and then we had like a 5 or 6 layover before our short flight to Montreal, and we were still the first ones there. So the previous teams definitely helped, especially with the longer meets. You kind of have to learn to maintain your energy and to maintain the positivity and work with your coaches, the other athletes throughout the meet and throughout the time you're together to just be the best and try to be the best and push each other to be your best, especially on the teams, because everyone wants to swim fast, but it's hard to do so, especially when the late nights, the long travel, and anything and everything that would be like negative or degrading on your mental health or even just physical health too. It's was so weird, and definitely the past teams, like the long meets, the late travel, traveling from Nanjing, a 6-day meet, to a 10-hour flight to my Maui to do another 4-day meet, and flying another 6-7 hours just to get back to Vancouver to fly another 5 hours to go all the way back home too.
Yeah.
It was crazy, but it was so much fun.
Yeah, and that was really kind of fantastic to watch. And I know, kind of selfishly, I really enjoyed getting to watch the mixed medley relay because obviously I have an athlete that I was coached that was on that team with you, and you guys kind of capped off. And I really just I have so many pictures from that moment, and just seeing how much fun you guys look like. You had a lot of fun as a relay team, just the smiles and the joy after you guys won the medal, and just going through the experience. So yeah, so you had mentioned the Pan Am Games, and we talked about that, and just like, can you tell me about that team? Because I heard the team was really fun and you had a good experience. So how was it with that team and all the other teams you'd been on? Just kind of that last team experience before you were setting up for the Olympic year.
It was probably the craziest and one of the most fun experience I've ever had. Everyone on that team kind of knew each other through people, or like met once or twice, or like have connected in some sort of way that we all kind of knew each other or have heard of each other going into the team. So it was way less of a barrier trying to learn everyone and learn their like what they did, what they swam, and like how they acted, and just learn their personality. But everyone in the team connected so well. We were all similar ages. We all had fun. We all had so many different things we could talk about and connect about. My roommate ended up being Ali Ackman, who I've only ever heard good things about. And she may be super small, but she's the mightiest and toughest chick I've like met throughout the competition. She had so much fun, and she was probably one of the most fun roommates that I've ever had. She was great from start to finish. Like, she was always so positive, and no matter what happened, she always had a smile on her face, and it was absolutely crazy. Definitely, like, it was so challenging for sure, but having Ali is like a great roommate, and just everyone else on the team is a great teammate for sure. Even though only being 2 guys, we kind of made jokes about being like, okay, so here's here's half the men's team, where's the other half, depending on who showed up to when. It was just really, really funny, especially because James ended up getting drug tested one of the days before the competition. And so we're like, oh yeah, we only have half the men's team. Where's the men's team? And we're just like, it was just like a whole bunch of jokes like that. Super fun. Even just like the competition with the super late nights and the super late prelim swims, getting in and swimming at, I think I swam the 200 fly at like 10:40 at night. And I was like, this is nuts. Like, I have no idea what to expect. And I think everyone kind of went through that the first day or the first couple days of racing, trying to figure out, or even if they swam on the last day. Like, I know Erica got sick and she didn't swim her event until the last day, and she still put out such a good time for everything that's happened and how late the competition went. But you kind of, at the same time, you kind of have to push through it and do your best, because that's what you're expecting. You're not really, you can't really expect anything less from yourself. Being like, no one's going to slow down for you just because it's 10:40 at night. You kind of have to raise yourself to that level and raise yourself to that bar and see if you can do it. Like, I know for me, the 200 fly, that meet wasn't the best meet that I've had for that. But at the same time, I was like, terrible as it sounds, I was like, oh, okay, like, time to get my head wrapped around it. But I used other choice words when doing it. I was like, okay, yeah, like, I kind of have to get my head back in the game, realize, take it in stride. Yeah, it sucks. Yeah, it wasn't your best race, but you know what? You still have 2 or 3 other races to get through. And it kind of lucked out because half of the relays, for the freestyle relays, there was only final swims. But if you had a medley relay, they had prelims and finals, but they put other people on it so that you could have like interchange them, which was kind of nice. Mm-hmm. So that was a lot of fun. But at the same time, like, going through at the meet each day, finding, you know what, okay, next day you got the 100 fly. Let's see what you can do. Okay, sure, 58, never broken 59 before. And I was like, this is great. I'm just kind of having fun as it is. And you know what, take it in stride. Obviously, this isn't the best circumstances, but you're going to have to adapt to it the best as possible and work through it. Like, I remember it was Alexia and I, after the 3rd day with James had left early because he ended up getting through doping control faster than we had. But Alexia and I, we were the last, or one of the last people out. We didn't get back to the village until like 1:30 in the morning, and we still hadn't had dinner. And we'd been gone since, like, I don't know, 7, 8 o'clock. So we've been there for like 6 hours at the time. We're like, wow, this is so late. And Jan and Ian and I were just sitting there laughing because we were going through the traffic of Peru, Lima, and we're just like, we're going to get hit by someone. Like, this bus driver is crazy. Like, they set up different routes for the Pan Am buses, and we're just like, oh my gosh, I think we got hit like 3 times, or almost got hit 3 times going through it. It was so crazy. We were so scared just getting back to the village this one night. Ate dinner, went back to bed, and then I remember the next morning, housekeeping came and knocked on our door at 8 a.m. and I was like, no, I've had like 6 hours of sleep. But yeah, definitely not the most accommodating, but you have to get through it because that's what everything's going to be. And going through, even on the relay, the 3rd day, no idea I was on the relay because one of the coaches who was coaching me forgot to tell me that I was on the relay and what I was swimming. And I was like, wait, I'm on the relay? He's like, yeah, you didn't know that? And I was like, no. He's like, oh yeah, you're on the relay. And I was like, oh, thanks for telling me. Didn't know. He's like, just don't worry, focus on your race. And I was like, oh yeah, like, it's fine, it's only 2 100s, but like, I didn't know I was on the relay. What stroke am I swimming? He's like, don't worry about it. I was like, I feel like you should probably know a little bit just so I can start preparing during warm down. It was just kind of funny. And we're going through that night, and this weirdest thing happened because after the race, we were going through, because James and Abby put us in such a good position. We're like, okay, like, I can do this. I came second. All I need to do is really just get myself into the race and do the best that I can, even though I didn't really know that I was swimming the relay. Just kind of get my head into it. It's 100. It's totally fine. Touch the wall, finish, and Alexia got in and did an awesome job catching everyone up and passing people and getting our hand on the wall for 3rd. It was so crazy. We were so excited and so happy for each other. But then we all stood there at the end getting our stuff, couldn't find our accreditation tags for doping control, and that's when they had them. But I looked back and I was like, something doesn't feel right. What doesn't feel right? And they went through, but the results weren't official. So that was the craziest part. We're sitting there not knowing for, I think we didn't know for at least 20 minutes, 25 minutes that the results weren't official yet. And I was like, they haven't, normally right after the race, you're like, okay, bronze medalist, silver medalist, gold medalist, and then they do the presentations after, but they didn't do that. So we're like, someone's getting disqualified. I really hope it wasn't one of us, because we didn't really know. And Alexia and I had already swam that night. So we're just like, okay, like, it could have been any one of us. Like, we have no idea what's going on. So we're sitting there, but either way, we knew we came 3rd or we got disqualified. So we're sitting there in the medal presentation room, getting ready, congratulating all the other teams. And we're sitting there in like the benches where they have third, and all of a sudden we see the Argentinians run in, and we're like, what is going on? And then they asked the Americans to step out of the room and told them, they're like, what? And they're like, oh yeah. And we heard them saying, they're like, yeah, the Americans got disqualified. And we're like, wait, what? Did we just move up a spot? So we're sitting there from third. All of a sudden we get bumped up a spot into second. And now here we are standing with silver medals on the podium, completely unaware that we totally just bumped up. And we're like, great. And it was just a really funny, crazy experience by the end of it.
That's so crazy. I couldn't even imagine being in the medal ceremony room, waiting for the medal, and then getting pulled out saying, actually, sorry guys, no
Yeah, it
medals
was
today.
like we kind of felt bad for them because we were talking to them. We're like, yeah, that was a really great race. Like you guys did such a good job. And then all of a sudden we see just a team of 4 in the Argentinians just running in. We're just like, what is going on? Like this is so wild. And they're like freaking out. And then they have to come and tell them, they're like, yeah, you actually got disqualified. I'm sorry to tell you this. I know it kind of sucks because they just won. They won by like 3 seconds or something like that. And then I think the difference from second to third or second to fourth was like anywhere between a second and a half, 2 seconds between the 3 teams, like Brazil, us, and the Argentinians. So if like any one of us had gone like a split second faster on each one of our splits, then we could have been anywhere between first to third in that time. But it was just a crazy thing thinking how close we were for like first. It was just a wild experience, but it was kind of fun because James was so nice about it. He's like, yeah, we really couldn't have done this without the girls. We all put up like a really good time and position and put ourselves in the best spot possible. And it was so rewarding just to be on the team between James, Javi, Alexia, and I, and everyone who worked together to like help us get there and get on the podium. It was just a lot of fun, and everyone worked their butts off just to put us in a great position to medal.
No, it was cool. And I like that story because obviously being connected with James and getting to hear him and his excitement of being on that team was really, really cool. So that kind of leads us into the Olympic year. And so you swam great at Pan Ams. So one thing that I really find interesting is between Pan Ams and then U Sports, which was finals this year at U Sports in February, were long course, you put up lifetime best in all of your best swims at either of those 2 meets. That's like, so going into the Olympic year, you're positioned where you want to be. You're swimming the best you've ever swum in your entire life, the Olympic year. But it wasn't without challenges, right? Like there was changes with the coaching staff, and we know how much the coaching staff and the team in Victoria was so good for you, and that there's so many great people there, and I know them personally. So once again, a little bit biased, but I really think there's a great team. But then Ryan made the move to Toronto, and you were still there with the team, and Brad took over, and you had a good season. You had swam great at U Sports. So how was it for you having to go through a change of your lead coach, but still working with the same team you worked with the last 3 years? So it's a change, but it's a familiar change, I guess.
Yeah, it was definitely a change, and it was definitely really hard at the beginning because here you are, you worked with Ryan and Brad for 3 years, and Ryan's then taking the leave and going somewhere else. So it's really hard knowing the coach that you worked with for 3 years is now leaving and going somewhere else. So it's definitely hard with that, but it also was kind of familiar at the same time because it's not like I haven't worked with Brad ever. Last year, I worked with Brad almost every day or as much as anyone throughout the center. Like we definitely worked a lot even last year, both this past season and the season before. We definitely worked a lot with Brad and Ellen. They were on the pool deck a lot more just with everything with Ryan and like the health issues and all that stuff. So that was really hard for us just to know like he definitely wasn't going to be around a lot more, but it also was okay because we had Brad, so we were taken care of. And it definitely helped that we had like Charlene and Liz and DDA. Everyone kind of stepped up to the plate and we're like, you know what, we're going to take the bar a little higher. It is Olympic year, but at the same time, we're going to make sure everyone's in the best position possible to get themselves or put themselves on the team.
Well, and like you mentioned earlier, and this is something we talked about, is like going through your career, having different coaches and having different people and working with different coaches on teams. Like you were built for this type of adjustment, right? Like it's not ideal and it's not exactly what you would want. Like obviously if you have a good connection with the coach, you want to be there, but being able to adapt and adjust and where you were in your career at 21 at the time, it led to a really strong season. Like I said, your youth sports were fantastic, right? Your finals are great.
Yep.
You put up some really, really great times. So I think that's a testament to you being able to adapt and say, okay, yeah, it's disappointing or it sucks or in the moment, but okay, I got a job to do now, right? And it's that girl who said, okay, I'm tired, but I'm just going to keep on going and I'm going to make that adjustment. So you go through your sports, you're swimming great. You've got to be on a high level of confidence. You know, you're ready to get up and prep and go to the Olympic trials. And then the news obviously breaks that, okay, well, they're postponed. And I think anybody in the swimming world who's been paying attention was like, they're not postponed. This Olympics isn't going to happen, even if they didn't announce it for a few weeks. So where does that how was it for you going through that process, and where does that leave you now, like with the 2021 Olympics? And I don't know if your plans were to continue on after this year, like, because you're at that point and you're doing different things where you are school wise. So can you run me through a little bit of how you handled that unfortunate bit of news and having to delay things, and where you stand and what you're doing to kind of get ready for what's next?
Yeah, definitely going from U Sports and having a really good U Sports, which I was kind of really surprised about because, like you said earlier, I wasn't rested or tapered going into the meet. It kind of is one of those things where we're like, okay, yeah, this is just another meet, another setup for when we're rested and tapered for trials. It'll be great because here I am putting out best times, unrested, untapered. We're just having a lot of fun. So that was the best part, and being around fun teammates and having a positive time. So I definitely think that really, really helped going through like the whole transition of trials being postponed and then inevitably being canceled for the year. I think that was a really hard decision, but seeing the fact that all of the NC2A meets and all of the NC2A teams being locked out of their pools and being closed down and then everything being canceled, you kind of, as terrible as it sounds, like it was kind of inevitable and you could see it coming in a way. It was only really a matter of time before trials was either going to be postponed or canceled, but considering everything that's happened, it looked more like it was going to be canceled for the year. So definitely it was really hard to hear, and obviously because you've worked so hard up until that point to have something canceled, which I've definitely had other friends and other teammates have gone through it, especially back in 2017 for the open water swims. They ended up canceling the open water swims because it still went on, but Swimming Canada pulled all the swimmers because the water was too warm for them. I think it ended up being like 32 degrees or 33 degrees. So they're just like, you know what, it's too dangerous to swim. We're just gonna take you guys out of the race. So hearing all that was definitely obviously really hard for them, but I could relate to it, especially now being like, you know what, it's still going to be okay. They still have other races to swim, and there's definitely going to be another time for the Olympics or any other meet. There's going to be more chances and more opportunities no matter what. It just, yeah, it's delayed a year. Yeah, it sucks. But at the same time, it definitely gives me more of an opportunity to train and get better and fix the mistakes that I was always making in races and just work towards striving to be better. Even going best times in U Sports, it gave me really like a lot of confidence going in, because I heard one of the UVic coaches, he's like, that was a really great swim. That's a best time from 2 years ago, from 2018 Pan Pacs, going best time. I mean, he even said to me, he's like, that looks like a 209 swim. And I was like, that's really positive and that's really rewarding to hear, knowing. So just giving me the extra opportunity to sit down and work in going into next year's trials will definitely help.
So does that adjust your plan for next year now that you've got, the delay of a year? And it obviously sounds like, no, you know what, if I got to wait a year, I got to wait a year, but I'm all in on this. So does that change or put anything on hold that you were planning, or were you already like, yeah, I'm going to 2024 anyway, so this just delays 1 year? Like, where were you at on that?
It definitely changes some ways, just because with the centers closing, I kind of have to figure out, like, swimming wise, what's going on with that. But for the most part, it didn't really change too much. It more just changed where I was going to be swimming. But at the same time, let's just keep going and having fun with it. Like, I'm enjoying it, so might as well.
Absolutely. I love that attitude. Well, I'm really excited to see you race at trials when they actually happen. I know it's going to be great. And I think that you've swum your whole career, and at 22, you're just turned 22, you are still on the uptick. Your career is still on the rise. And I think that's phenomenal. I think a lot of swimmers who think, oh, I have to do it all by the time I'm 14, 15, 16, or else I'm never going to make it. And I just see your progression over your entire career, and I love seeing that. So I'm super excited to see you race, hopefully at trials next year and in Tokyo in 2021. That would be awesome. So I'll be pulling for you. Thank you so much for doing this. I always like to end with one question, though, and I love to hear athletes or coaches share. If you had to go back and talk to yourself at a young age, whatever it is, or talk to a young swimmer, and you're going to give them one piece of advice, that are coming up in their career, they're like you, a good young swimmer, and they're going to go through the process. Now that you've been through a lot of the ride and now you're an adult, what would you say to that young Danielle, or a young girl or boy who's a swimmer who's coming up through the ranks?
For me, there's definitely, it kind of goes into like 1 to 2 pieces of advice. Yeah, it's going to be hard. Yeah, things aren't going to go your way. Some things will suck, but you know what? Inevitably, it will end up being the best, and you'll find the positives in everything. So things will work out. You just kind of have to keep working hard, do your best, and stay positive. Yeah, things are going to suck, but you know what? They don't suck forever. Just enjoy the moment, enjoy what you do, make friends, laugh lots, enjoy it all. Go big or go home, really. Just enjoy it.
Absolutely. I think that's fantastic advice. And I can't thank you enough for doing this and sharing your story. I love when people open up and talk about their journeys, because I don't think we get to hear enough of that in our sport or in any sports. And I'm a bit of a nut, and I'm watching this Michael Jordan documentary right now, or the Bulls one, The Last Dance. And I love hearing the story. The process is really fascinating to me. So thank you for sharing. Please stay safe. Please stay healthy. Good luck with your training, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for allowing me to do this.
Oh, my pleasure. All right. You take care.
You too.